Good evening, everyone. Chip Cooper for FTC Guardian and my partner, Alan Cutts. Here we are at the end of July in 2018 for the last hangout in the month of July. Looking forward to the last part of summer, August, and then continuing into the fall. The year is really moving on by us here. Things have sort of settled down with me. I've had a lot of events lately. One, the most recent, a family birthday. It wasn't mine, which is good. But someone in our family had one. So we went and visited family, including children and grandchildren and all of that. It was great fun. So we've sort of settled in for August and the remainder of the summer. Looking forward to college football. We're about a month away now. So, Alan, how are you doing? What's up?
Good. Very, very busy. I'm going to bed directly after this. I've been up since 3 in the morning, so I'm exhausted. So we get through with everything here. I'm going to bed. So let's get rolling.
Working on FTC Guardian. Who knows?
It's 3 in the morning.
Oh, wow. So I guess it's time to get started, right? Let's go ahead and do it.
Yep.
We're going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see the screen. You should be able to.
Got it.
There we go. You see the title, pretty simple. We're still on GDPR, installment number 6, and we're going to be talking about cookies in this particular presentation. Let's get moving here. And you know that we're going to have a housekeeping announcement. We always do. It's for informational purposes only, and it's not legal advice, and we're certainly not affiliated here at FTC Guardian with the Federal Trade Commission. So we've seen this before. We know GDPR was effective on May 25 earlier this year. Now, you can also see here a list of the GDPR related hangouts that we've had. I'm going to tick this off very quickly. Number 1, what is it? Does it apply to you? Number 2, we jumped right into security policies because we have a new one. We actually have 2. In the member area. Number 3, then we drill down into controllers and processors and talked about the difference between the two. This is really extremely important that you understand the difference because you may be acting solely as one or the other, or maybe both in connection with processing data. Number 4, we got involved in opt-in forms and data processing agreements, also known as DPAs. And of course, we have materials. We have the replay videos of these Hangouts and the documents inside the members area on the left mark or the right margin, down at the very bottom of the page. There's a link that says GDPR materials. All this stuff is there, including the documents. The last one, number 5, talked about the privacy policy, and this one, number 6, about cookies. Now, really pay very close attention to this and look at the very bottom of the slide. And this is what you need to understand, and we'll go through the 5 conditions in just a second. Do not, I repeat, do not use the material that we're going to present in this Hangout unless you can answer yes to each of the 5 conditions listed above. So we're going to provide a solution for you regarding cookies, and it will apply to you if you say and can answer yes legitimately to these 5 conditions. Now, here we go. Number 1, you're engaged in digital advertising. Well, you know that, whether you are or not, online advertising. So if you are, then if you're not, then just listen patiently to the rest. If not, listen very carefully. Number 2, you use cookies and or other technical IDs to serve targeted ads to visitors. If you're engaged in digital ads in number 1, you almost are certain to answer yes to number 2, cookies and other technical IDs. Number 3, you do not collect, quote, sensitive personal data, and we'll get into a definition of what it means in just a second. But medical data, financial data, that sort of thing. We'll drill down in just a minute. Number 4, you collect only non-sensitive personal data based on the visitor's past browsing history And most of you that are engaged in digital ads should be able to answer this question, yes. And then number 5, your privacy policy is the FTC Guardian retargeted privacy policy that's in the member area, right? That has the following disclosures: cookies and web beacons, personalized and behavioral ads, and analytics. Now, if you have chosen that privacy policy in our member area, it's in the supplemental documents category. Unless you've deleted something, you will have in your privacy policy these 3 sections of text: cookies and web beacons, personalized and behavioral ads, and analytics. And then finally, again, don't use the material in this presentation, in this Hangout, unless you can answer yes to those questions. And we're going to get back and review that again toward the end of the presentation. But if you're involved in retargeted ads, behavioral ads, online behavioral advertising, there are a number of terms that all mean essentially the same thing. You are going to be relying upon cookies or other tracking devices as indicated here. So you see in panel number 1, this website visitor accesses a web page, and number 2, the cookie is passed for tracking purposes. And here for our purposes, the tracking is for purposes of retargeted ads, personalized ads, that sort of thing. Now, we get to a brief review of the difference between controllers and processors. And you recall from the review that we just went through very quickly, we have a complete Hangout dedicated to understanding the critical difference between controllers and processors. But here is the short form of it. Controllers are the parties or persons or companies that collect data directly from EU data subjects. The classic example would be an opt-in form. But in this presentation, we're going to be talking about a controller that collects data in the form of cookies, which is defined by GDPR as personal data. So that's what we're talking about here in this Hangout. And that's why you see the yellow arrow pointing to controllers, because that's what we're going to be focusing on. But you need to understand also that processors process the data for controllers. So controllers collect it directly from EU data subjects and then may pass it along to processors upstream as subcontractors or sub-processors to process it. So again, if you're not quite sure about the distinctions here, go back and review the Hangout dedicated to controllers and processors. All right, now by way of history, and I'm not going to go into great detail here, it's important to understand what CalOPPA is, which is a short-term acronym for the California Online Privacy Protection Act of 2004. That goes back a long way, 2004. And this is the current approach, the current legal approach at the present time to privacy in the U.S., with a few exceptions, one of which, of course, is a very recent update by California of its privacy rules. And we're going to talk about that later this year. These new rules go into effect January 1, 2020. But generally speaking, CalOPPA has been the sole legal framework for privacy regulation beginning in 2004 up until the last few months, right? Except for very specialized statutes, such as statutes that control or relate to privacy and data security for medical records, known as patient health information or financial information. But in terms of general application, not very specific in terms of health or financial information, CalOPPA has been the rule. And it's really operated very, in terms of jurisdiction, very similar in concept to GDPR. Basically, California began saying in 2004, if you sell into California to California residents, or if you're collecting personal information from them, even though you're outside of California, you need to have a privacy policy, right? And the privacy policy needs to have certain things, right? We're not going to go into all of that. But the key term that you needed to understand back then and up as well as today is the California definition for personally identifiable information, known by its acronym as PII, P-I-I, right? So we look at the sub bullet points there, and it's just common sense: first and last name, home address, email address, phone number, etc. Essentially, these were the very basic and common sense approaches to personally identifiable information. And in your privacy policy, you had to describe how it was collected, used, and shared with others, right? And then there was another category that was everything else. And that was identified as non-personally identifiable information. And there was no requirement that there be any description of sharing, right? So that's the legal framework that we in the United States, generally speaking, have been relying upon since 2004. However, GDPR changes all of this. So GDPR focuses on, and you can go back and see that the key term is personally identifiable information, or PII. Now we're dealing with respect to GDPR, personal data. And personal data means any type of information that can relate to an identifiable natural person who's a data subject in the EU, who can be identified directly or indirectly. And it can be a name and identification number, location number. And you see the arrow and the underlined, an online identifier, right? And so now we're talking about, you see the arrow, online identifiers include cookies and mobile ad IDs for tracking purposes, right? So now the big change between here, where we've been, where we didn't have to worry about these cookies and identifiers, tracking devices, now we see that they are, by definition, personal data. A huge change in the way that GDPR governs privacy and data security, as contrasted with what we've been dealing with for a long time since 2004. Now we get to the definition of sensitive personal data. And here we're talking about these items listed in the sub bullets. Now, if you're collecting any item of sensitive data, as indicated earlier, the solution that we're going to offer in this Hangout does not apply to you, because you're going to have to get an explicit consent from the EU data subject to collect sensitive personal data. And as you see at the bottom of the slide, explicit consent means opt-in, right? So I'll tick these off very, very quickly. Racial or ethnic origin, political opinions, religious or philosophical beliefs, trade union membership, genetic data, biometric data, health, sex life, and or sexual orientation. Any of those are considered, and all of those are considered to be sensitive personal data. If you're collecting it, this solution we're about to present does not apply. So non-sensitive personal data clearly now relates to online identifiers such as cookies or other technical tracking IDs. And it's important to understand, going back to this slide, sensitive data, if you look at the bottom, requires explicit consent, meaning the user must opt in or you're not going to be able to collect it. Very important there. And the distinction here for non-sensitive personal data is explicit opt-in is not required. Now, there's some interpretation where to the effect that in certain circumstances, opt-in may be required. We're going to talk about that now. So here, before we get into the proposed solution for you, it's important to understand that Article 6 of the GDPR presents 6 possibilities for a lawful basis for processing activity. In other words, these 6 situations provide, I guess, what might be known as legal standing for you to go ahead and collect personal data, right? if you cannot qualify under at least one of these 6, then you have no right to be collecting personal data under any circumstances, right? So the first, probably either the first or very close to the first order of priority is to make sure that you have, and I'm doing it for us because we're going to be making a recommended solution to you, that we have this one of these checked off, a so-called legal basis for processing activity. And of course, the 2 most likely for retargeted advertising are numbers 5 and 6 at the bottom in yellow text. But we'll get to those in a second. Number 1, the vital interest of the individual. Number 2, the public interest. Number 3, contractual necessity. Number 4, compliance with legal obligations. And I'm not going to explain at this time what they are because we're focusing on cookies. The 2 that could possibly apply, each may apply, would be numbers 5 and 6. Number 5, unambiguous consent of the individual. And then number 6, legitimate interest of the data controller, of course, which would be collecting this type of information known as cookies or other technical IDs. So you can see the arrow there running from cookies and other technical IDs to number 5, unambiguous consent of the individual. So we need to be able to get, procure, obtain unambiguous consent of the data subject as a lawful basis for going ahead and collecting that information, right? So what is the type of consent required for number 5, unambiguous consent of the individual? Well, one approach, and there is a difference of opinion at this time as to exactly what type of consent is required by GDPR. And the GDPR statute itself had very limited discussion about exactly what is required for retargeted ads and the collection of this type of data, specifically cookies and other tracking IDs. So there are really 2 options at this time. One would be that you need to get an actual opt-in. This is the more conservative approach of the 2, right? But then the opt-in approach is considerably more difficult and might be more expensive depending on your circumstances because there are a lot of steps and requirements for the opt-in consent. So what about opt-out? This is where we are leaning in terms of the solution that we are presenting, opt-out rather than opt-in. And it's the easiest method, as you can see from the sub-bullets, and it has legal authority. It's endorsed by the Spanish Data Protection Authority, which of course Spain is a member of the EU, and there are similar conditions set out by the Working Party in Article 29. So at this point, let me stress this, and I probably will again during the Q&A here that follows. We are not going to get into a legal debate on which is the preferred option. I've already stated here, as you can see in this slide, that opt-in consent is the most conservative or more conservative of the 2, legally speaking, right? But it's more difficult and more trouble to comply with. So we're moving toward opt-out, which we believe we have legal authority for. And if we ever discover that we have further clarification regarding GDPR as to whether and to what extent it might be applicable, then we might have to make a change in the future, but we might not. We just need further guidance from the European officials. So for the time being, we're going to rely on opt-out. Now here again, I'm not going to go through these again. We're about to make the actual presentation of a relatively simple approach to cookies for retargeted ad purposes. And again, I remind you, you shouldn't use this solution unless you can say yes to these 5 questions. If you cannot say yes to those 5 questions, then you're probably going to have to go back to the first bullet here, opt-in consent. But we're not going to present exactly how to do that in this presentation. As indicated, we're going to talk about opt-in consent. So this is a solution, not the only one, but a solution And again, only if the 5 conditions apply. So number one, there are only really 2 major pieces to it. Number one, a pop-up notice on your website describing tracking methodology, and I'll explain in a minute exactly what it should say. It should be presented above the fold on your website. It should link directly to your privacy policy. And again, you remember one of the 5 conditions is that it's our retargeted privacy policy that has the specified text, and it has an accept button. And then in your privacy policy that is linked from the notice, there should be opt-out opportunities. So here is the precise language for the pop-up notice that would appear on the website. And I'm going to read this. And when I get through with this presentation in the next few minutes, Alan is going to explain that we have such a notice available for you at this time in the members area. So here is what it says. This website uses cookies and similar technology to track browsing behavior for adapting the website for your use, for delivering our services, for market research, and for advertising. Detailed information, including the right to withdraw consent, in parentheses, opt out, can be found in our privacy policy. To review our privacy policy, click here. Of course, that's a link pointing to the privacy policy. By using our site, you agree to these terms, and there's an accept button. And it's important to understand here, as indicated in the blue text at the top of this pop-up notice, that there's actually a specification of the exact purposes here in the pop-up notice. So this is not a situation which is not authorized under GDPR, which is blanket consent. Because if you look back here, it says for your use, for delivering our services, for market research, and for advertising. So there are specified very specific purposes for using the tracking devices. So that is the notice, and it goes to the privacy policy, which is in our system. And here are the final takeaways. And Alan's going to jump in here in just a minute when I'm finished, and he's going to explain how that works, that being the pop-up notice. So the takeaways are general identifiers such as cookies and mobile ad IDs are now personal data under GDPR, and they were not personally identifiable information under CalAPA, which has been in effect since 2004 and which we've been living under in the United States. Number 2, non-sensitive personal data includes cookies and other technical IDs. Explicit opt-in is not required for non-specific personal data. That's important. Unambiguous consent is the recommended basis for data processing for cookies and mobile IDs that qualify. And then finally, the solution discussed is only applicable to advertisers that qualify for the 5 conditions. And I apologize for beating that drum too much, but I just wanted to make it absolutely clear in case someone logged in maybe earlier or later, let's put it that way. So the final tags here in my final slide, early tomorrow morning when I take the replay video and load it up to the website, these are the searchable tags that will lead to this replay video. GDPR, of course, cookies, and technical tracking IDs. So that is the final slide that I have. I'm going to go away now from the share my screen and get back to Alan and to me. And I'm going to turn it over to Alan right now, who's going to describe the
let me get going. I'll get rolling here. Let me answer a couple of questions. This is for Jessica. Or says, for the first time in a long attendance history, I'm lost. Jessica, really, it takes a little while to get your head around it. If you have a website and you're not doing any advertising online, you're not doing anything, maybe you have some ads on your site, but you're not doing retargeting, you're not running Facebook ads, you're not running Google ads, but maybe you have some little pop-up ads on your website that, maybe you're getting revenue from Google or something like that, on that side, then the solution that we're proposing is all you need. if you're doing anything more than that, where you're really targeting GDPR subjects, EU subjects, and stuff like that, then it's going to be totally different. But we know that most of our members are not targeting EU subjects. Most of them are like us, like FTC Guardian, and basically target US subjects. But at the same time, we still have to follow the cookie policies that are out there, right? Go ahead.
Let me say, I must respectfully disagree. The purpose here is to qualify under GDPR for retargeted ads. So I think it's not only going to work for, what we're doing in the US, but, if we are targeting and dropping cookies on EU data subjects, we believe, until we're advised to the contrary, that this is going to work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we got people like Jessica who are just lost in the whole system. So it's like, don't worry about it. The system. What we're going to tell you is going to help you, even if you're not targeting them, but you're doing retargeting. Because we have a lot of members who don't do anything. They're not doing any advertising whatsoever. So they're grasping around, why do I need to do this if I don't do any advertising? I don't do anything.
If you're not dropping cookies or other technical identifiers for purposes of tracking people, and we assume that you're tracking them in order to serve them targeted ads, then fine. But
that's what I want to get. And that's what I want to get across to people. Even those people who don't think they're doing anything probably are, because if you have a website, you probably have Google Analytics on it. If you have Google Ads where you're generating revenue from Google, so you're allowing Google to rent a spot on your website to search an ad, you fall into what we're talking about, because you don't know where that person is coming from.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So you don't know where that person is coming from. So you're not really doing it. You're not going out there developing ads. You're not doing retargeting ads, but you're renting space to Google or to whoever else to put ads on your website to generate revenue or whatever that is. Right. So you still fall under this.
The bottom line of what Alan is saying is, regardless of whether you're actually retargeting or not, if you're dropping cookies for any purpose, such as analytics or these other purposes that Alan mentioned, then you need to have a solution for that, right?
Yep.
Because anybody on your website, any visitor could be a data subject of the EU. So this is going to help you comply, and it's really pretty easy. You've got to have the.
And so you guys realize you drop cookies for everything. I mean, I created a little pop-up proof now pop-up. It drops a little cookie. I mean, everything you do drops a cookie on somebody's website, in somebody's browser.
One situation where you're dropping a cookie and GDPR recognizes that that's fine. And the classic example is if you have a checkout page with a shopping cart, right?
Yep.
A cookie is going to get dropped anytime somebody selects an item to purchase, right?
Yep.
That's going to happen automatically. You don't even know that it's happening, but the shopping cart won't operate correctly without the cookie or other tracking device being dropped. So in that situation, if that is all you're doing, you don't need this solution. But if you're doing anything else other than shopping cart management, then as Alan indicated, this is a solution you need to incorporate.
Yeah, and if you're using like little pop-ups, like I've created one called Proof Now, there's another one called Proof. Any of those little pop-ups or anything like that, those all use cookies, because they say, well, this person came one time, don't show it to them again. Like if say you go on the site and it shows a pop-up, right? Well, in order to show the pop-up, and it says, well, if the person comes back the second time, don't show them this pop-up, show them another pop-up, or don't show pop at all. That's cookie based. The way it does it is by planting a cookie and cookie in the person. So let's get to what the solution is. Then we'll come back to a couple of questions real quick.
And remember, there are really two pieces here. Let's don't get too complicated. One is the notice Alan's going to show you. That's step one. And that notice points to the privacy policy. That has to be in place. That's it. Okay.
Yep. I'm going to show my screen.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to show my screen. Okay, so everybody, this is our, what we call our article page. Everybody, all members have access to this pop-up. You can change the colors. It will change when you change the color of the header here. It will change the color of the I accept. This is the exact text that Chip talked about in here.
Are you talking about the top one with the green background?
This one right here, where I'm pointing the blue.
I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Right there where the blue is. The blue, you can change this background. When you change the color of this background to match your website, it also changes the color of the accept button there. This is the exact text that Chip talked about. And there's the click that goes to the privacy policy. And you'll want to be an affiliate because we have updated with FTC Guardian, and you plug in your affiliate ID in the generator. When you do that, it adds your affiliate link in here. So if somebody clicks on that, they're going to go to FTC Guardian and they're tagged with your affiliate ID. So there is a video, and when you log in, let me see if I can log in quickly and easily, given bandwidth.
Is this?
So what you want to do is go right here. Just enlarge it a little bit. You're going to go right here to where it says Cookie and Privacy Policy Update Generator. You're going to click on that. You're going to click Generate Pop-up. Right here, you're going to put the URL where your privacy policy is. Where does it reside? The HTML. If you're an affiliate, put your affiliate ID in here. If you want to change the colors of the boxes, you can see right now, here's a preview. If I want to change the color of that box to red, it changes it to red. The default text is already here. This link is already hyperlinked to privacy_policy. But if for some reason, if for some reason it doesn't look highlighted, all you've got to do is copy this, what we call a token, copy this token, just that little group right here. I mean, for example, like if I wanted to put privacy policy in here again, because you could, this is a WYSIWYG. I could do this right here. I could do privacy policy where privacy policy is here. Copy this token and link it right there. So then it's linked here and over here. You change the color of it. Once you click submit, I'll go back because I don't need to do it. I'll just go back. You go right here and get the code and you drop that on your website. And that is all you have to do.
Now, Alan, let's say that I'm visiting this website for the first time. When I hit the home page, this pop-up occurs, right?
Yep.
But then when I click agree, then the next time I hit on the home, land on the home page, I don't see the pop-up anymore, correct?
You will not see it again. The only time you will see it again is if you make substantial changes to your privacy policy. You can go right here and click reset. And that tells the consumer when they come back again that you've made changes, substantial changes to your website, and you click this and they will see it again because you've made substantial changes to your privacy policy for whatever reason in the future. That way you don't have to recreate the whole thing again. You hit the reset button and all of a sudden people start seeing it again. So
let me just jump in and say this is the first time that I've seen this, right? Alan and I have had several discussions the last couple of weeks about what this needs to be, right? But Alan has been on his own working with the programmer to create this pop-up and exactly what you just saw. And I'm extremely impressed by it. I think they've done a terrific job. I just wanted to say, tip my hat to Alan and the programmer for coming up with a really cool solution, right? So I really like it. And obviously that link goes to the privacy policy. That is the second piece of the solution, right?
Yep.
In the privacy policy, you will see a number of links for opting out. You remember, this is an opt-out approach. So we first of all have that notice that pops up and then disappears after you've seen it once. And it links to the privacy policy where the visitor can opt out. So that's the solution. And I really like what Alan's done here. I think it's very, very good.
Cool. Okay, so let's get back to what other questions we have, because I did see a real important one that I want to get answered. And it's from Donna. I'll go ahead and give her a name. From Donna. And maybe she's a CPA, accountant type. I'm not sure. So the reason why is because she does collect sensitive information, but she doesn't say that she collects it on her website. She says, I collect tax return and financial information from my customers. Is there something in my privacy policy that I need to address? Because she doesn't say here that she's, because you're not collecting, a tax return. You're not going to, you might email it, but it's not something that you're doing on the website, right?
But you're collecting it. How is it collected? I mean,
I'm assuming if you're collecting tax returns or financial information, it's via email
form, right? That if she's doing my taxes,
yeah,
I'll be putting in name, address, phone number, and all sorts of information about my earnings and that sort of thing. This solution isn't really going to work. I mean, you need an opt-in, which is more complicated. So you would be a classic exception to what we've just presented, right? You're in the sensitive category. Sensitive information requires very explicit opt-in.
But is it, if she doesn't, and this is where I want to draw the line, if she doesn't collect it on her website, if she collects it via email, if somebody says, here's my tax return, email my tax return, and here's
still collecting it, right?
Okay, so it doesn't matter.
She's still collecting it, and it's being archived somewhere. So it's being and it's being processed, this information. So she may not collect it the way 98% of our members are collecting it, but she's still collecting it. It's going to be processed. It's going to be archived. All of those things are defined as processing. And so, yeah, you're collecting, processing sensitive data, and you're going to need an opt-in, what is known as an explicit opt-in. So this solution will not help you. You're going to have to investigate the other option. Yeah, that's about as far as we can take it in this presentation. But it's clearly this doesn't apply. Explicit opt-in does.
Yeah, I mean the pop-up box helps you up to the extent that you start collecting. Once they become a client and then you collect this other information, you're going to have to get them to sign off on other stuff.
Right. I mean, you probably going to say yes, I'm guessing, to to 4 of the 5 questions or conditions, but one is you collect sensitive information, and so you're disqualified from using this approach.
Yeah, Donna. When are you're not, if you're collecting this tax return information and financial data in advance, then yes, it's going to scare people off from your website because you're going to tell them in advance that I need that. If you're not collecting it until they're a customer, if they're still a lead and then they become a customer and then you say, okay, now I do it. And then you can present, you say, yeah, that's what I thought, Donna. You're not asking everybody to send you your tax returns until they're a client. So once they're a client, then you need to give them something where they click off and they give you explicit rights to accept all this data. Not
right. And basically, you need a customized solution. This solution that we're presenting here applies across the board to a vast majority of our members. We've got a pretty good handle on who our members are. Well, we know who they are, but
I know who they are. I know who they are.
Alec probably knows everybody personally. I don't, because he handles all that. But generally speaking, we know the types of businesses that are members here typically. And so this approach that we're presenting will apply to the vast majority of our members.
Yeah.
But there are going to be exceptions, such as this particular one, and you need to develop some kind of a customized solution to handle the requirement for explicit opt-in consent.
Yep. Yep. And again, you can do the explicit opt-in for what you're doing, Donna, after they become a client. And then, they're a client. Then you need to serve them with something where they have to sign off on it. And what all you're doing, sign off as a separate agreement saying that I'm going to need all this information, and
and there should be some adjustments to the privacy policy as well.
Yeah, and yeah, so you should probably put some adjustments to your privacy policy that you do this once they become a client.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. If someone
everybody else think this is a cool solution, or do we have a lot of questions?
Yeah, I saw Lewis or something. This is great for non-techies.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's very good. We appreciate the compliment. Let me make this comment while Alan's looking.
Yep.
One of the reasons why the cookie presentation that we have in this particular Hangout has been postponed until Hangout number 6, right, is that we spent a pretty significant amount of time trying to figure out what approach would be relatively simple and easy for the vast majority of our members, right? We could have easily said opt-in explicit consent, but that's not going to be a really popular or workable solution for about, I'm thinking 95% of you, maybe more, right? So we've been trying to figure this out to come up with one that would work for you, would be the easiest way to go about it. And this is it. But again, it won't apply to everybody. So we finally gotten around to dealing with this subject after looking at a lot of different approaches and trying to figure this out. And that's what you have in this presentation. So what other questions do you have?
The other one was from Sheila, and then someone else. Is there somewhere that's stored? Yeah, we store the information. I just have a basic database that stores it, that says that the person, clicked yes or whatever. We don't collect any data on it, but we know that if the person, that's the only way we know that they clicked yes before, is we store the data saying that they clicked yes once before. So that's all the data we basically keep on them, is knowing that browser said yes before. So, and that's all we really need to keep. We don't keep any, we don't keep any other data because we don't track that kind of stuff for us. What happens if the person says no to not having their information tracked?
If they say no,
well, see, on our website, as a matter of fact, I mean,
what is the question?
Clear your browser and go to CNN. There's a pop-up at the bottom. It says accept. That's all it says. Ours says accept.
All right, but I want to answer this question. As I understand it, the question is, what if they don't click I agree? There isn't a no option there.
There's an accept option, and that's it.
Accept instead of agree. Accept. So if they do not click accept and they keep coming back to the website, that thing pops up every time, doesn't it?
Yep.
Okay. So the notice also says, if you continue using the website, you're deemed to have accepted. And then it also has the accept button. So even though they didn't click on accept, every time they return, the pop-up apply appears, but at least they have, by returning, and that last phrase in the notice, at least there's an argument that they have accepted it. However, the pop-up keeps coming back. And every time they keep coming back, when they see the notice, they'll still see the link to the privacy policy, which if they click it, is going to show them how to opt out of all these things.
Yep.
Right. Assuming those opt-out links have not been deleted by you, which I doubt very seriously anybody would do. But So there's still that capability of opting out. And every time they come back, they're going to be reminded of this, plus have the capability of clicking on the link and going to the privacy policy and opting out. So I think we're going to be okay.
Yep. And Phil, yes, if you clear your cookies, you're going to see the pop-up. And it's the same with CNN, CBS, Fox, Bleacher Report, NBA, CBS. I've checked them all. And so we've kind of modeled what I've done after everything everybody else does. So if somebody clears their cookies, then obviously you're going to see the pop-up again. Like I said, you can do the same thing. Clear your cookies, go to CNN. You're going to see the pop-up. Go to Sports Illustrated. You'll see the same thing. It's the way it works. I am not specifically targeting EU subjects, but approximately a third or more of the form entries on my site are EU subjects. I'm collecting birth information for astrology. She's collecting birth information, and I live in the U.S. She's collecting birth information.
Yeah, let me answer this question. Clearly, what we've said and what Alan's referred to a number of times, and I have, is if you go back to the original question that was raised in the first Hangout here, number one on GDPR was, does it apply to you, right? And the basic answer was that, do you target EU data subjects? And we said, do you have a sales page in one of the languages, say French or German? Do you have a testimonial list from those countries? Or do you take payment in euros? That would be evidence of targeting, right? And so if you answer no, we don't do those things, therefore we're not targeting, then you're probably not, you're not subject to GDPR, except, and I've had several calls with clients over the last 2 or 3 months, excuse me, where we've gone through this analysis on the call, right? And they say, well, good, I'm not targeting, so I don't have to worry about GDPR, right? And then I ask this follow-up question. I mean, you've got your list of members, right? Or subscribers, whatever we call them, customers, right? How many in roughly percentage are from the EU? And this guy says, 30 to 33%, so about a third. So I'm saying that. So you don't target these people. Nevertheless, about a third of your customers just happen to be EU data subjects. I was expecting the guy to say, 5%, 7, 8, something like that. No problem. But if it's 25 or 30% or more, even though you're not targeting, you're going to probably be regulated. So if you're in that situation, you should assume that you're being regulated. So if that's I believe that was the situation in this question, right?
Yeah.
So even though you're not actually actively targeting, I think you better assume that you're regulated and proceed, forthwith to be compliant.
Yeah. Joanne said something about I do not have an opt-in, but I'm going to have an opt-in on my website. However, I'm planning on selling hair and training programs. Am I subject to GDPR? Basically, if you're going to have any kind of cookie stuff on, if you just use what I showed you on the how to use it, you'll be fine. If you've got a pop-up, you're collecting name and email address, you're collecting data, you're setting cookies. I know you are. If you're using lead pages or ClickFunnels or anything to collect opt-ins, you're setting cookies. So just use the solution we showed you, and you'll be absolutely fine. How do we get Privacy Shield certification? Oh, somebody, yeah. This is how do we get to Privacy Shield certification? You show on the trust and compliance document page link and the retargeting.
All right, that's a good question, and that leads me to conclude that we probably should have a Hangout devoted to that.
Okay.
In the meantime, until we have one, and it's probably going to be in January, because I've just about mapped out, and of course, at least in the next 2 or 3 months, I've mapped out the topics for Hangouts through the end of this year. I did it over the last 2 or 3 days. I haven't given them to Alan yet, just the next month, because if some big event occurs, I'm going to have to knock out one of my topics, and this is current events, right? So it's subject to change, but I've already blocked that out. So it's probably going to be January, and I'll make a note of it and add it in. But until then, if you simply Google how to certify for the Privacy Shield, there are going to be all sorts of links, and there's a lot of information about it. What I'm going to do probably in January is I'm going to simplify some of that. I'm going to, I'm going to boil it all down and show you exactly where to go, that sort of thing. I'll give you, a really sort of a boiled down version of where to go. But in the meantime, all you got to do is Google it and you'll see a lot of information.
Yep.
The
last one is about is Norm. Norm, we don't really store any information on anybody. All we do is say that you've ticked the box, you've accepted it, so that we know that browser has clicked OK. So that's all we store. So that's all there is. And if they clear their browser cookies, it's going to pop up again, because we can't say anything other than that browser has accepted it. So
let me just say one other thing too.
Yep.
We're going to continue for the remaining months of this year. We're going to have every month, of course, we have 2 Hangouts, one of which is devoted to GDPR, right? And this is the 6th one, so we've got a few left. The last one in December is going to be the new California Privacy Act. And it's going to go into effect 1/1/2020. So as we get to the end of this year, where we're just about a year out, I'm going to provide you with the information about that. And I can tell you in advance that it might not apply to a lot of you, right? That's good news. So I'll give you the details at the end of the year as we move, into the holiday season. Maybe it's good news for the holidays. Who knows?
Yeah, there's one Charlie's posted a couple of times. For years, Chip has advised those of us in the U.S. to keep our data and email services inside the U.S. Does GDPR change the strategy, or is it okay to use services outside the U.S. even though our main focus is clients inside the U.S.?
Well,
I don't know. I've been around since 2014, and I don't remember us saying use companies inside the U.S. I don't know.
No, I mean, AWS, I think, is the leader. Would you agree with me?
I would absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
And they reserve the right, generally speaking, to host your data anywhere in the cloud, right? The cloud, anywhere. You can pay a lot extra, and a lot of companies have done that. I don't know if they're going to continue, but you can pay extra for data to be hosted only in servers located physically in the EU. But that's not going to really help you out very much, I don't think. I wouldn't let that be a major factor in decisions. I think the better approach is just to use your hosting service provider and then go about the process of becoming compliant with GDPR over time. I think that's the best solution for you.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. So again, we spent a lot of time trying to figure this one out. We think we have. I'm very impressed with the little solution that Alan has cooked up here. I like it a lot. I want to tip my hat again to him. Stay tuned. We've got a couple of really interesting topics coming up next month in August. Alan should be getting you some emails out pretty soon now, I think, announcing the dates and the times. So with that, that's all I have. I think that's all Alan has. Is that correct?
That's it.
All right. So good night, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night.